Unions have condemned the violent skirmishes at the Katlehong school, citing risk to learners as well as educators. Xolani Fakude, secretariat officer at the African Democratic Teachers Union, and Basil Manuel, the executive director at the National Professional Teachers Organization of SA, joins us now for this discussion. Gentlemen, good afternoon and thank you so much for your time. Xolani, perhaps let's begin with you and just give us how you've responded to this recent attack that happened in that Katlehong schools and just what your immediate concerns and calls to action in light of this incident are.
Well, thank you very much, Katlehong. First, let me greet you, let me greet the viewers as well, and let me also greet my good colleague, Basil. Now, we are naturally very, very concerned. Inherently, we are very concerned as a union of education workers when we see our schools being turned into battlegrounds. The fact of the matter is that for teaching, for effective teaching and learning to happen, both learners and education workers, support staff, they need to feel safe. It has got quite a huge psychological impact when you see people coming into schools, walk easily during contact time, brandishing pangas and guns and so forth, threatening teachers, threatening everyone else there. It is becoming something which we cannot accept. We are therefore calling for very, very strong action to be taken. There must be a thorough investigation. There must be a very proper and clear action that is being taken by the Department of Basic Education and also working with other departments, not only the DBE, because the issues around school safety are not only limited to just the learner and the teacher in the classroom or the Department of Basic Education only, but they are a societal matter. Basil will agree with me that we always call on society to work together to make sure that our schools can be a bit safer. And then we are also calling for the funding of public education so that there can be implementable policies such as the National School Safety Framework, for instance, which could go a long way towards preventing some of these incidents, unfortunate incidents that we see. But we strongly condemn it, and we are saying that such behavior has got absolutely no space in our schools.
Basil, perhaps maybe you can also just weigh in there. I mean, this is the second incident in just a week where we are seeing what we saw in the KZN, someone entering the school and shooting down one of the teachers. How do you assess the impact of violence and crime and security for students, educators, and just the school communities as a whole in the country? What interventions and resources do you think we need to address such issues?
Thank you very much, and let me greet Xolani as well. First of all, the disrespect for the school is what shocks me first. And of course, the disrespect for the teachers. Teachers cannot simply release a child when this is not the person that enrolled the child. It's a safety matter. It is not taking sides anywhere. That's the first point. Secondly, the trauma. The very children that were collected, if you looked at that video, you would see how they were traumatized. What still to speak about the classmates, etc., who may not even know what exactly was happening. And then the teachers are in the firing line. And it is to that point where I want to come. Our teachers run the gauntlet every day in their duty to protect and to ensure that you as the parent are comfortable that your children are safe. Now, what is it that we need to be doing? What more can we do? This school is not a school that has been beset by violence, where there has been a lot of trouble, etc. And so you can't expect that there would be police stationed there. Yes, immediately maybe there must be, but not long term. And even security guards are not a long-term feature of every school. Schools can't be prisons, but they must be respected. Xolani is absolutely right. The community must own the school, protect the school. But to have a minister of religion, a pastor, who should be a leader, being party to such behavior is in itself seriously letting the side down. But now we also need to see that we have sufficient barriers that prevent access to the children and teachers, parents and whoever comes to school. It is the office area where they must stop. And as a first measure, these physical barriers need to be enhanced. needs to be looked at a little more carefully. And that is all part of ensuring that we keep our learners safer. We cannot station a policeman at every school. Neither do we want that, because schools mustn't look like prisons. They must be the place that children come to and know that they are safe there. But this incident shows us just how little respect there is for our teachers. And that is what we must change. The community must respect schools and schooling.
Xolani, Basil makes mention of the fact that we should not be having policemen at schools, and it's not the role of teachers to be policemen either. What do you believe is that role of teachers and the staff and just the education unions that they need to play in safeguarding the schools?
Well, Basil is absolutely correct. Our sole purpose, our main purpose by being in school is curriculum delivery. It is about us making sure that our learners can reach a particular level of efficiency in terms of educational outcomes. Now, what is important for us, therefore, is that there needs to be a way in which there can be constant engagement, such that education workers as well, teachers, can also be sufficiently schooled about how they can even come up and noting early warning systems that may be relating to a particular learner or learners, for instance. By the way, Katlehong, we are also exposed to the very same incidents. There are times whereby you hear of stories, you see viral videos of learners being assaulted, being insulted, not learners, but rather teachers being assaulted and insulted by learners. So what we are saying, therefore, is that indeed, as education workers, we've got a particular focus there, which is curriculum coverage. And therefore, what we are calling for is that let there be a more decisive approach in terms of how we can empower schools, not just teachers also, but then also the SGPs have got a role to play. That is the community element. That's where it comes in. Other departments have got also a role to play in. But we certainly cannot have our schools looking or resembling war zones whereby there will be police. Basil is correct. There's no way you can have a police officer in each and every school. However, do police also take responsibility and adopt schools and make sure that they do regular visits, regular searches, etc.? That is what we want to see. But ultimately, what is important is for the community to take responsibility. It's for the whole of society, all sectors of society, to call and to take responsibility for the safety of our learners.
You speak of communities, Xolani, and what we saw yesterday subsequent to the video going viral was school children and the community and the action that they then took upon the pastor and his place of worship. What's your take on just the role that, like you say, communities need to be there and they need to be there for the safety of the children, but how much more of what the culture is of a certain community infiltrates how schools become, how schools are governed, and how the children in the school behave?
You are asking a very, very important question, Katlehong. And this is where I want to start. We require an entire paradigm shift. We do not encourage lawlessness in the country. We are saying that there are laws in this country. And therefore, the relevant bodies of government must be allowed to play their decisive role in terms of how they mitigate or investigate or even make those who are responsible for some of these intransitions accountable. Now, when I say we require a paradigm shift, we still have got incidents whereby when there is a community protest, you would find the community closing the school and leaving the shebeen next door. But the school will be closed down and targeted as a cheap bargaining chip, which tells you that we need a whole societal paradigm shift about how we see education, but also about how we need to ensure that our schools are havens of safety. That is why we are saying what happens in school is a reflection of what happens in society. And that is why we keep on calling on this. let us all take responsibility.
Basil, you mentioned earlier that there's a sense of no respect, not just for the institution being a school, but also for the teachers. Are we seeing a prevalence in terms of where these schools are located, where such activities take place, in terms of geographically? Is it more also the public schools as opposed to private schools? And does that say anything about our behavior as a society and as a community where we are seeing a rise and an increase in such activities?
At first, I want to dispel a notion that private schools have no issues and no problems. The sophistication may differ, but it is still there. The bullying of teachers by parents takes on a slightly different, slightly more sophisticated perspective, but it's there in all the schools. But what we need to be doing is respect the roles that everybody has to play. Parents must be respected, but in turn, the parents must know that they have to do likewise to our teachers. We cannot simply leave it to chance. Now, is this a growing problem? Sometimes we see all these videos and we think that it's getting out of hand. One school where this happens is one too many. So I want to say, yes, we've seen a number of incidents. I don't think it is so widespread that there's a national crisis, but there is a crisis when teachers start feeling that they're vulnerable. Because when teachers see videos such as this, they wonder when it is going to happen on their doorstep. And that is what we must prevent. We have to prevent that feeling of vulnerability, which is more important even than when it actually does happen, because it affects the psyche, it affects their mental well-being. And we want teachers and learners to feel safe in that place called school, because that is ultimately what schooling is about. It's the safe place for learning. And teachers have a pastoral role. They do take responsibility for things far more than they should. But our circumstances in our country is such that in some areas they have to be the counselor. They are almost the policeman, but they're not recognized for that. Their primary role is to teach. And we want to see a greater return to teaching so that everybody else plays their rightful role. But let me, whilst I'm at it, also acknowledge the role that the police have played in this instance and the role that our courts are playing. And of course, our education department, they responded immediately. And that is what we want to see. And of course, we want to see justice prevailing. We can't condone lawlessness. It is just unacceptable that the incidents should have happened after the fact and burning down of the tent and so on. And we call on our teachers to be the catalyst there, to speak to children, to speak to their parents about remaining calm. More harm is done when we start burning things, etc. That is certainly not the lawlessness that one wants to see happen after an incident. The incident is bad enough.
Most certainly. What would you say, Basil, are what you would view as the systematic issues that hinder the efforts to create a safe and inclusive learning environment in some of our schools in the country?
Let me start by saying this particular school is a safe school, and it takes one person to change the perception about the school. But what does hinder it? There are socioeconomic conditions that impact on schools, but you would even find safe schools in the worst socioeconomic conditions, where people stand together and make it happen, where the governing bodies representing the parents and the teachers and the management of the school and then the department support, schools automatically flourish. So there's no golden rule, but one of the prerequisites is working together. What prevents us from doing it is when we do have people that see schools as objects where they can pilfer, steal, rip things down, and of course, where they think that the school doesn't deserve their respect. And that is where the problem lies. And our teachers are trying very hard. Nobody wants to work in an unsafe environment.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. Certainly an issue that needs to be deliberated upon in ensuring that our schools remain a safe haven for our ones to be learning in. That was Xolani Fakude, who's the Secretariat Officer of the African Democratic Union, as well as Basil Manuel, who's the Executive Director of NAPTOSA.